The worst thing you could do is put me on a fucking pedestal. I can tell you that now. Listen, it's lovely to see you all, and I'm so glad you came. What a shitty thing to do to cancel the event before we actually got to do it. But it's not anything new, and it's the kind of thing that we expect to see all the time. I want to run some theories past you and see whether or not anybody thinks I'm making any damn sense. So, with your permission, I'm going to do that. Is there anybody in the room here that's got a mobile phone? That was a silly question, wasn't it? Hey, everybody's got one now. Now let me give you a scenario. You get up in the morning and you open your eyes, and if you're old enough, you reach for your glasses, and if you're young enough, if you're not young enough, you bounce out of bed, and if you're old enough, you roll out of bed, and you stand up and you put your glasses on, or not, and you pick up your phone and you start looking. Sound familiar to anybody? Right? And before you know it, you're into the routine of the day, whether that takes place when you get up or when you go to breakfast, and you start looking through stuff and going, no, I don't. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not engaging with that, but I will engage with that. No, I'll look at that later. I'll look at that later. No, I'll look at that later. Right? And later, that never comes. Right? Which is why we've all got completely unorganised bookmarks. Yeah. Right, what was it I was looking for? This is the first bookmark of 35,000. Oh, bugger, right, okay. So we do this thing where we collect information, but actually we're doing nothing with it, generally, as a rule of thumb. Eventually that leads you down, and I always think about the story of the great Dr. Oliver Sacks, who worked on a program whereby he managed to bring people who've been in comas for years back to life. You may have seen it in the film Awakenings. And he likened their particular illness to a Parkinson's that made you eventually freeze into a still statue-like nothingness. And I think that's what this is doing to us. I think eventually we are stuck into a routine of like or dislike, right? Storing the information for later. We have become less livers of our lives than we have creators of the information that surrounds us from the minute we get up. And that's where I think we are. And in order to do something about that, I've designed what's called the Warrior Teacher Program, which some people here are about to take part in. So I'm looking forward to getting started. So let me tell you why I think it's an issue. When I was a young man, when I was a child, I wasn't the easiest of children, as you can imagine, but my mum would take me to the zoo or wherever the hell else it was she took me, and she'd say to me, all right, I'm going to be here by the ice cream van. Go and watch the monkey pick his nose or whatever it is he's going to do and feed the sea lions. And off I'd go and wander around and I'd see all these things and I'd come back and she'd go, what did you see? Well, I saw the sea lions and I saw the tigers and I ended up working at that zoo, weirdly enough. I saw the tigers and I saw the gorillas and all the stuff that comes with it. Now, most of us will have that kind of memory. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. Whatever it may have been, it's the kind of thing that would have happened, right? And another way that you can deal with a child is to treat it like Pavlov's dogs. Who knows the story of Pavlov's dogs? Right? You ring the bell, the dog salivates, it eats the food. Yep. If all this information surrounds us and we are crippled by it, like I say we are, and paralysed into a stance of doing nothing, then surely the answer to that is to become teachers. And if we are surrounded by information constantly, it means that we all have to become teachers of each other. So we all become teachers and we all become students. Because the fight that we are fighting against what the guys have already talked about, the wokery and nonsense of these ridiculous bumfumblers, most of them, right? What we have to do is we have to become better teachers for ourselves. We become what are called warrior teachers. Now, anybody here who's done a PGCE will tell you that there are two ways that you can be a teacher at the very base level. So if you were going to become a teacher, let's pick someone. If you were going to become a teacher, do you have any wishes to become a teacher?
Definitely not.
What are you going to be when you grow up?
Hopefully Prime Minister.
Prime Minister? I'm definitely there for that. Left or right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Left or right? Yes.
Right.
That's a political answer if there was one.
On the right.
Thank you so much. But yes, if you're going to be a teacher, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision whether you believe that the people that will be in front of you that you will teach are Pavlov's dogs, or whether they are the person that would go wandering around the zoo to discover for themselves. And that's known as your orientation for learning. That's known as what you as a teacher will use as your predominant philosophy for teaching others. You either think they're Pavlov's dogs, in which case you will nudge and tweak and push them whichever way you can, or you think that they are capable of their own learning, in which case you might provide a framework and off they'd go on a voyage of discovery, much like visiting the zoo when I was a child. This is a simple choice to make. And there isn't anybody I've ever told that to who doesn't say, oh, I'm a humanist. They all say it because they don't want to be seen to be the behaviourist, and yet we live in a world dominated by the behaviourist orientation to learning to such an extent that you get up every morning and you sit there going, like or dislike. I'll look at that later, no I won't. So we have to ask ourselves the question, has technology caused that? Or is technology responding to something that's been caused elsewhere? We've already had mentioned today the duplicity of the Americans in the current state of affairs, right? But that's not just where it is. I mean, it has come from America, admittedly. But the truth of the matter is that in universities now, this is what they do. They use behaviourist methods of teaching, as a behaviourist orientation to teaching, as the base level, right? So that's their philosophy is, you need to be nudged to be the way that they think you should be. You don't have autonomy, right? The television does that too. Personally, I blame Challenge 25. I think it all started there. When 16-year-olds get pissed, you heard less of them talking about gender. So I think the idea is we're seeing this particular type of behaviourist orientation going right through society. Now this gets even worse. There's also a thing in teaching, if you're all going to become teachers, you're going to need to know this, called Bloom's taxonomy. You remember this?
I think I slipped through it.
Did you?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, you missed child abuse, so I'm not surprised you miss everything. Right, so... How American. Right, so this taxonomy, which is essentially, it says that we all learn in a particular way. So you know something, right? It's like 2 + 2 = 4, right? We all know that. You ask somebody the question why, and they go, duh. Because they don't know why 2 + 2 = 4, so they know it, but they don't understand it. So Bloom's taxonomy goes know, understand, synthesize, analyze, evaluate, create. Right? So it's designed to take somebody from understand something at the very base level and then to become an expert in that particular thing. Around the end of the mid-90s, in teaching, across universities and across school in this country, they changed Bloom's taxonomy and they removed the two most important bits, which was evaluate and judge, which are right at the top. The ability of you to take what you've learned, evaluate and judge it, and then to create something from it. They took them out and they replaced them with the word activism. They replaced it with the word activism. And this teaching module that's being used in universities is called the COM-BB teaching model. And it was designed by Susan Michie, the second in command of the Communist Party, who has just been given a plum job at the World Health Organization. Right? So once you start to look, you can't avoid seeing the connections between these things. So I'll leave you with my last statement, which is you all need to become warrior teachers, because we can change legislation, but this is going nowhere fast. We can get Parliament to make laws that will stop them, but this is going nowhere fast. And every conversation you have moving forward should be as a warrior teacher, because every person that you meet is another antibody to fight an infection that is cultural, not political. It is cultural, not political. Now, people talk about the Overton window. Well, I have what I call the wall window, which I made up myself, right? And on one side, you've got humanist orientation. On the other side, you've got behaviorist orientation. And in the middle, you've got people that know what they're doing, essentially, that can navigate both sides. It's time that the adults got back in the room, and in a world that is steeped in information, that is absolutely critical that we have time to learn, and we have time to learn regularly. Although podcasts have provided an opportunity for that, that's a true revolution. I think that we all need to become warrior teachers, and by default, we all need to become warrior students. Thank you very much.
Do we have some questions for our Barry here?
Not too many, I've only got about 3 answers.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
That was quite inspiring.
Thank you.
But I'm not sure what a warrior teacher is.
A warrior teacher is someone who is adept at teaching somebody else to be a warrior teacher. And if you want to know any more, you can stand up to the course.
All right.
Sorry? It's about instilling that mindset in the individuals that you're talking to and in yourself. In essence, a warrior teacher is somebody that is heading for autonomous, self-propelled personal responsibility. Right?
Yes, sir.
So what you're saying is we need a long march through the institution.
Yes, right. We just have to reverse the bloody thing. I mean, now at this point, parallel institutions is probably the only way to go.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can I just ask you what your background is? Is it
I'm a
science
teacher.
or art?
Listen, I'm a Mr. All Sorts and a Mr. I worked in the public sector. I was in the public sector where I was one of the first people to teach unconscious bias. Right, and I taught it once and never again. And that was about 13 years ago because I told them it was a bag of shite. And they said, right, you won't be doing that course anymore then.
Okay.
Right.
No, what I really want to know is, have you got any sort of technical background?
Well, I currently teach equality, diversity and inclusion to STEM students doing PhDs. But my background is I'm not educational. I was a really sort of privately interested in biology many years ago, but my background is in teaching. I've been a teacher for 30 years. But in the private sector and the public sector, anybody over 18, I'm not children, it's adult education in informal environments. So the civil service, I've worked with the NHS. That was a funny one, working with the NHS. I had the man from the renal unit was there, and the woman from ophthalmology came. She forgot her glasses, and he went to the toilet more than anybody else. I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? So I've been all over the shop, really. And I always talk about people becoming polymaths light. In that it's probably a good idea these days if you've got an overview of most things, and then perhaps specialise in one. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Would it be an idea to set up our own schools and universities then, instead of relying on the current ones that are very heavily
Well, this has started in America already, as you may be aware. Kathleen Stockleach Bogosian, they've started a new college in. I'd look for that and have a look. I think it'll come. Or I think what we'll see is we've got about another 10 years of this wokery. They'll change teacher training in the next 2 years, and then it will just naturally disappear after a period of time. We don't have the same issues here as they do in America because of the public involvement in education and health.
Yeah. Folks, sorry, there's just a lot of people in here, so we're just having trouble hearing. So I just want to make sure everybody in the back can hear what Barry has to say. Does anybody have any more questions for our Barry here? I mean, you and I. Was there someone?
Well, if you think about it, it's a generation thing. So by 2040s, the younger generation in that time zone are going to have even more crazy ideas. We're going to go back to the war years and go forward as things progress.
Well, you make an excellent point about the temporality of this problem. What we have now that we didn't have before is the internet, and I would suggest that the reason it's happening in the first place is because men our age dropped the ball. Right, the truth of the matter is that anybody who's our age or about there, we were around when the internet started, and it blindsided us just as much as it's blindsided everybody else, and we weren't therefore able to get the frame of mind that was needed to teach the next generation how to live with it. Now is time to put that right. So I would say to you, there's no reason for that to happen when we now have records going back far enough so that anybody can get there on the phone with it. We've gone past the point of mass availability, and we now have mass accessibility, and that's a good thing. Anybody else?
I mean, you and I have spoken before, and obviously I came from the American school system, and it's very, very different. And you see in the United States, schools are run locally, and so parents are fighting back in their cities and towns and things like that, where they're saying, no, this is not okay. No, that's not okay. Whereas in this country, y'all have a very different.
And it's a very different education.
It's much more difficult.
I mean, we, for example, with gender ideology, right? It is already against the regulations to teach gender ideology in school, right? The problem is that Ofsted, who are supposed to police that, are captured, right? So these captures go right through the institution, and you and I can laugh about the Long March, but the truth of the matter is that all those people that have been taught this bullshit by Butler and her cronies are now running HR departments in schools across the country.
I work in a school and we spent 6 hours teaching gender ideology in one day. We cancelled all the classes and taught it for 6 hours straight. Except I was put in charge. I think I have the beauty of being a teaching assistant, meaning I'm kind of alone in a corner to do what I want by myself, while the main teachers are doing their own thing on the front. I'm within a Muslim majority school where all these kids are like, in this home, in my home, this would be so different. Like this is haram. I'm not like, you and I, and it's our little group together of these Muslim boys and their teenagers. We're going to have a little talk now, okay? And I made everything neutral, saying they actually felt that space to discuss, like is everything, you know, homophobic if you just don't agree with absolutely everything? I said, these are really good questions. But the thing is that I'm allowed, and then all of a sudden the teacher comes around saying, you listen to her now, whatever she's saying, it's going to be good.
See, it's that kind of stupidity that'll fucking get them in the end. That's what I think. But it's, again, you make it. The other thing is, when it comes to that one in particular, when you're talking about gender ideology, don't ever forget how ephemeral this is. Right, okay, like you said the House of Cards, didn't you? And I was laughing with Carl earlier on about, I was on outside a pub in Canal Street holding court, which you can imagine I do when I can. And there's all these people around, and my mate comes up with this young girl who's about 18 years old, and she's obviously binding. No, she's got like something out of 1890s China. It's awful. And she sat down next to me and she was watching me like a hawk, as if she'd never ever met anybody who was old enough to be this. I felt like Peter Ustinov in Logan's Run. Right, so I'm sat there, right, with all my cats. So I'm sat there, and all of a sudden she grabbed me on the arm like I was a runaway motorcycle. She went, no. And she went, I'm non-binary. And I said, are you? I said, that's utterly extraordinary. Male or female? And she went, female. 2 weeks later, she stopped binding. You know, this stuff is ephemeral. Did the same with a young man over the weekend. Yeah, can I help you?
The thing is, on a more sort of...
I didn't understand that.
Who brought that idiot? Sorry, can we start? And I don't mean you, I mean the phone.
Well, when mine says anything, I just say, shut the
fuck up, yeah.
She then says, I'll be as quiet as a mouse.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was that, you know, you've been extremely amusing and it's all very, very interesting, but I work as a consultant for a large engineering company that has just spent £3.5 million developing a new training centre for apprentices, which most of you would probably agree is a pretty good thing.
Bloody right, yeah.
And we're looking at 250 new apprenticeships over the next 5 years. The government have refused to fund us for the simple reason that we're not woke enough. They've come back and said to us, you have failed your application on prevent, protect and diversity policies.
Right, yeah.
Not on anything else.
No.
Because, you know, frankly, they don't know anything about what we do. We are the state of the art in the world. We are probably one of the best training organisations for the particular skills that we develop anywhere on the planet. So these people are not capable of criticising that, but they are capable of committing treason against our country with their nonsense.
Well,
it really is time they stopped.
Well, UKRI have placed EDISRs above every funding stream.
Yeah.
Every funding stream, right? I'll have to stop because I'm running out of time, but every funding stream, that's about to change. There's change coming. Now, in regards to putting in your bid, talk to me after, because I'm just in conversation with a number of engineering companies and professors, and we're going to start a program on the levelling up agenda, which is all about the kind of training you're talking about. Okay. So let's have a conversation. Yeah?
Let's meet up.
I'm going.
Give it up for Barry, everybody.